right. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our SciComm Academy lunch talk. So when people are still logging in, I'll start with a quick introduction to the SciComm Academy and SciMingo. So my name is Danielle, and I'm the project manager of the SciComm Academy here at SciMingo. So we're a Brussels-based nonprofit, and we're helping researchers like you to take their first steps in science communication. So at SciMingo, we run several initiatives that help research reach society. And one of those initiatives is the Flemish PhD Cup, where young researchers explain their PhD in 90 seconds to a broad audience. And another thing we organize is the Vlaamse Scriptieprijs, or the Flemish Thesis Competition, where we look for the strongest, most newsworthy theses from Flemish universities and colleges. And our goal is to make excellent research accessible for a wider public. So this year, the Scriptieprijs, or the Thesis Prize ceremony, takes place on December 17 in the Gothic Hall of Kortrijk's City Hall. So if you'd like to attend, please check out scriptieprijs.be and you can sign up for a spot there. And then we also run the SciComm Academy, and that is a platform with hands-on courses that help researchers communicate their work clearly, confidently, and creatively to the audiences they want to reach. And we offer hands-on training courses such as presenting on stage, popular science writing, podcasting, video and pitch, infographics, AI for science communication, and more. And we are currently finalizing our program for spring 2026. And you can check out our website for available spots or join our newsletter, and then we will stay up to date on this new program. And to help you a bit with that, you see two beautiful QR codes floating on my fake background. And if you scan the Winkle one, so the purple one on top, you'll go to the course page. And if you scan the warm salmony orange one, you will go to the newsletter sign up. So if you want to check that out, you can scan those two codes. And then about today's session. Today's session is all about how we can use AI and specifically ChatGPT to prepare for media interviews in a smart and efficient way. And Jo, our guest of today, will walk you through what solid media prep actually involves, how journalists approach an interview, and where AI can support you in shaping your key messages, anticipating tough questions, and scanning relevant context quickly. So he will cover some of the best practices for prompting, and then we'll show you all of this through a practical example. So we're also going to talk to ChatGPT today. And so Jo Detavernier has more than 17 years of experience in advising B2B companies on PR, content marketing, and crisis communication. And he started his career at leading PR agencies in Brussels and now runs his own consultancy from Austin, Texas. So Jo had to wake up extremely early to be here at 2 o'clock of our time today. And Jo is professionally accredited in both public relations and strategic communication, holds a master from Ghent University, and has published widely on communication and crisis strategy. So Jo, I'm very happy to have you here in our lunch talk, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I think that most of you are in Brussels time and Paris time, so it's afternoon. It's still only 7 a.m. in San Antonio, Texas, from which I'm calling in right now. So I will try to do this as best as I can, given the dire circumstances. Let me start projecting my slides. There we go. Needless to say, these slides, I'll be glad to share them with you afterwards, after this session. ChatGPT can be used not only for help with researching scriptsies, papers, and the like, but also for helping prepare media interviews. And the objective of what follows is to help you as a future spokesperson, because one can reasonably expect that there will be a time in the future where the organization that you work for, whether that is an academic organization or a commercial company or any other entity, will ask you to explain certain things pertaining to your research, your knowledge, your expertise to the media. And then Chat GPT, in whatever iteration it will then be available at that time, will be will potential will be a useful resource for you to help prepare for that media interview. And that is the scope of what we're going to be doing in the next 55 minutes. So my objective is to equip you with the necessary understanding and skills on how ChatGPT works and how it can be intelligently used to prepare for efficient media interviews. Um, we have a group of, I believe, around 15 to 20 people who are calling in. So that's an intimate, cozy group of people. That means that I can allow for you to chime in as we go. Please feel free to leave questions using the chat function, and then Danielle will help me, and she will help moderate and ping me. So do not also, because one thing, certain aspects of the training will build on certain others that preceded. I would not want you to just be stuck and then you know and early on in the session not be able to ask questions. Um, that's not what I want. I want you to assimilate as much as possible everything that follows. All of this sounds like it's going to be very complicated and very difficult, what follows next, but it's actually not, right? There's a logic to using ChatGPT, and I'm going to show you that logic. There's a kind of a grammar, certain principles that that you should adhere to using ChatGPT, and when you adhere to these principles, wonderful results um, will ensue. It will follow. So preparing for media interviews. Um, I'm going to zoom out a little bit now. I'm going to talk about what purpose media interviews serve, right? Because I want you to know, it's important to know the context to then understand where ChatGPT comes in, right? So there's two parties to an interview. There's journalists who want to um, produce content that their audiences will appreciate, engage with, right? And they work in a commercial model, right? People consume the content, and then an outlet is able to monetize this in some way, right? So you need a content that appeals to an audience. So that's the agenda of the journalists and the media organizations they work for. And then there is your own agenda, right? And every spokesperson who enters a media interview should have their own agenda, right? What does that agenda look like? A spokesperson should aim to um, should have a communication objective that pertains to what their audience knows and or feels and or does. So the objective should be to have at least one stakeholder group, right? Know something and or feel something and or do something. If you do not know what anyone would have to know, feel, or do following your communication, you need to stop yourself in your tracks and rethink and reconsider whether you should actually be giving an interview. The time is not right to give an interview if you have not laid out for yourself what the objective is. Because if you don't know what the objective is, how could you possibly define then what the key messages are going to be that you will want to communicate? And how can you possibly then define whether you're even speaking to the right journalist and whether the occasion is suitable, whether this is really a legitimate good occasion to convey your messages and reach that audience? So when those two meet each other, a journalist, when there's an interest with a journalist to have a conversation with you, and you and the people that work with you, the people that help you, have identified that as a legitimate, useful opportunity to achieve at least one communication goal, when those two collide, then that's a good time to give an interview. Okay. All right. There's different things that come into preparing a media interview. There's the scanning of the news of the day, developing efficient key messages and proof points, anticipating tough questions, preparing a Q&A, and mapping knowledge and attitude of the journalist. Let me go through these one by one in more detail. Um, Developing key messages and proof points. You will have to identify for yourself what are the messages I want to convey and what are data points that are going to back up my claims, right? If you're going to make a claim, I'm going to have a key message on how um, uh, a solution helps a company achieve something, then you're going to have to quantify this in, okay, how are you going to make a difference to the company or to consumers, whatever. My point is valid and applies to every possible context. You're going to have to back up your claim with numbers, data, right? So that's key messages and proof points, right? You're going to have to anticipate tough questions. These are questions that you'd rather not receive, right? What could a journalist possibly ask you that you'd rather not answer, but you're going to have to answer it if it is a question within the scope of the interview, right? And if it's a reasonable question, but it's still a difficult question, right? What are you going to answer, right? Um, some spokespeople like to prepare Q&As. Um, I say some spokespeople like. I'm not presenting these Q&As as a must-have. It all depends a little bit. An experienced spokesperson will often not need a Q&A because they will have delivery techniques such as bridging that they can employ, and they'll manage just having their key messages and their Q&As. But if you're just starting off, giving interviews, really a Q&A, question answer that you prepare. Okay, what if I receive this question? I'm going to answer that. This question, that will be helpful. Okay, knowledge and attitude of the journalist who's going to take an interview from me. Does this journalist have any experience with the subject matter? Has this journalist written about this subject matter in the recent past? And what did they write? Or maybe they wrote about one of the competitors of the company I work for. And what did they write about these competitors? What is so? Was the attitude? Is the journalist well informed, not informed, medium informed? How do I need to address this? Right? Um, the journalist needs to understand, right? It could be potentially some parts of the audience you want to reach will have more knowledge than the journalist. That is possible, but the journalist is still a filter. So you still need to be able to get through the journalist as a filter to reach that audience. Um, so speaking over the heads of journalists is not going to help you. It'll make that key messages are not understood, right? That data points, proof points are not understood. So you need to adapt and make sure that the journalist follows the narrative, right? And scanning news of the day, that's something that is sometimes forgotten by spokespeople or even the people who coach them or assist spokespeople. Let's say you decide on Monday to give an interview. The journalist tells you, okay, I'm going to ask about this and this and this, these three things. But then you need to monitor the news, of course, because there could be a new development. If that interview then takes place on Thursday, for example, there could in the meantime be a new development that a journalist didn't tell you they were going to ask a question about, but now they're going to ask a question about that because it's been in the news and it's relevant and it's germane to the story and it's germane to the interview, relevant to the interview that you're giving. So somebody who helps you or yourself need to monitor the should monitor, would do best to monitor the news in the lead up to the interview. Okay, because the news is the context, new developments are the context in which the journalist operates. If there's a new development between having agreed on the interview and the interview taking place, the journalist will know about it. If the journalist is a professional, knows what they're doing, and will ask questions. So these are best practices in preparing for a media interview. And needless to say, I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to show you then on screen, and you can ask any questions you want. I'm going to show you how ChatGPT can help with all of this. Okay, that's already quite a lot of talking from my end. Is there at this point somebody who has a remark or a question, a concern? Then If so, please you share that already in the comments.
For now, I don't see any questions or comments yet, but feel free to drop something.
Okay, that's good. Prompting best practices. So there's a few best practices that are applicable to ChatGPT prompting. I'm going to go over them one by one. Some are more relevant than others, and I will tell you which ones are. Some are more relevant than others for the kind of research we're going to be doing in the next half hour. Um, so these are general ChatGPT prompting best practices that I think are that I think you should know about. Okay, it will help you in the context of preparing media interviews, but it will help you actually with everything you try to accomplish using ChatGPT prompts. Number one, be clear and specific. So don't beat around the bush. Be very specific about what it is you want from ChatGPT, right? Give me a report of, give me a summary of this. Do this for me, okay? Um, Clear and specific. 1 or 2 sentences, lay out your ask, okay? Give context. I am trying to accomplish this. Provide me with the following. Okay, so context. What is the context of your question? What are you trying to accomplish? And ChatGPT has remembers you, right? ChatGPT remembers you, remembers who you are, remembers past conversations. So when I engage with ChatGPT on a daily basis. Um, ChatGPT knows that I am a public relations consultant and reference that also, right? Sometimes I will forget. Well, I actually don't need to anymore because ChatGPT remembers. So I don't always mention the context and why I'm asking certain things. And then ChatGPT will remind me of my job and say, yes, but as a PR consultant, you really need to take into account this and this and this and this and this, right? So that's because I've gave context in the past. I do need to remind myself if I ever change jobs to let ChatGPT know. Otherwise, I'm gonna start getting input that's less than relevant. So be clear and specific. Give context. Sit role or tone is for the context of the research a little bit less important. Role or tone actually means that you pertains to you, for example, telling ChatGPT, take on the role as a business consultant, or take on the role as a communication consultant um, who um, advises me on X and Y and Z. So set role or tone is useful for deliverables where a paper or recommendation or a chunk of text copy needs to be produced in a certain tone. I think it's a little bit less relevant here. However, I added it to the list. This is just a pointer that can come of use in other contexts for you. Break big tasks into steps. So it's useful and recommended that you um, ask ChatGPT not everything all at once, but slice things up a little bit. Okay, that is so. Do this, and then when you're done, do this. Then when you're done, do this. Okay. So slicing things up is useful. Provide examples when possible. Um, uh, that I think that's self-explanatory, right? For example, give me on um, give me 3 bullets on possible key messages for my presentation to the board next week. Possible key messages are the following: 1, 2, 3. right? So those are three examples. Use constraints, and some of this you will have noticed. This is my different points are not perfectly mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. I'm fully aware of that. There's a little bit of overlap, right? So use constraints means that you, and this comes this comes close to being clear and specific, is that you really draw lines like, okay, this is what I want, this is what I not want. For example, um, give me an overview of articles that were published in media outlets A, B, and C in the period 1st of April until 1st of December. So those were two constraints already, right? And I can add a third. I can, for example, then ask, make sure that your note is not longer than 200 words. That's a third one. I'm not saying that that last one would be very relevant, but you get my point, right? Constraints. Um, Constraints help by being very specific, also very specific on where ChatGPT needs to find the information, right? Helps limit the chance of what's called hallucinations. And I think that most of you have heard of hallucinations. Hallucinations are ChatGPT making things up. Okay. That does sometimes happen. But by following all these prompting recommendations, including constraints, you limit the odds of that happening. And then important caveat, I had not mentioned this yet. I saved that remark for this slide, but it goes without saying that ChatGPT is a resource, is a help, but you will need to check everything that ChatGPT does for you, of course. So it's a tool, but you cannot just leave it all over to the tool and not make factual checks to the tool. Will the tool sometimes make mistakes? Yes, it will, right? And there's nobody who has yet crack the code and find a way of optimizing the prompts to a degree that hallucinations are reduced to zero. So that's not a guarantee I can give you. But the tool is useful. The tool is a big time saver. Will save you a lot of time. Will give you inspiration. Will will the answers on different prompts that we're going to go through in the following exercise will make you see things a little bit from a different angle. Will show you some things that you hadn't thought of. All of that is valuable. All of that is useful. But then you're going to have to check the sources, right? The sources, and you're going to have to keep an eye on what ChatGPT dug up from the different sources or tells you that it dug up from different sources. Um, Iterate and refine. So um, you can iterate and refine. You can and should go in a conversation with ChatGPT. ChatGPT will give you an answer, and then you can start digging deeper. And then you can ask ChatGPT on that second point, what exactly are the drivers behind A, B, and C, or what is the outcome, or explain or elaborate on, right? I'll give you some examples of that in what follows. But converse with ChatGPT, right? And you can even ask ChatGPT. You can even have like meta communication, so to speak, with ChatGPT, where you can ask ChatGPT, "Is the way I prompted you and asked for information, was that the right prompt, or should I have structured my prompt a little bit differently?" And ChatGPT will help you, right? It's like working with a calculator, asking the calculator, "What buttons should I push?" Right? If I only had that in high school, things would have been less stressful. So yes, so on a mental level, you can ask ChatGPT how to work with ChatGPT. And trust me, I know from experience that ChatGPT will be very happy to help you. Yes. Use few shot prompting, difficult words, difficult concept, but that is actually the same as giving like 2, 3 examples. It's called, so if you want to impress friends, at a party, tell them that you use few shot promptings to tune ChatGPT, and they'll be very impressed. But as said, it really just means giving different examples. As for alternatives, see, the ask for alternatives is maybe one of the less relevant ones. Huh? You can ask for alternatives, like for example, yes, I'm going to write a press release this is the content of the press release. Give me 3 different titles for the press release so I can pick one that I like best. That is asking for alternatives. A tiny little bit less relevant than some of the others. Okay, we're building up. We're building up to the part where for which everybody came, right? Um,
Maybe
then yeah,
can I,
yes,
because I didn't see any questions, but maybe I have a question about the
yes,
previous session.
yes,
And that is when you're talking about memory of ChatGPT,
yeah.
do you think it could sometimes be useful to kind of use the like the memory free function and actually start on from a blank page? Do you think in some cases that could be actually interesting or useful, or even to sort of like compare the outcome to the one that contains memory and the one that doesn't?
I think it could be. I don't. Yes, that's a good question. I think it could be. I don't see the added value for the context in which we are with the scope of this exercise. Um, but I can imagine if you would want to test, for example, um, the degree to which, if you would want to do a share of voice analysis and check how, I'm having a hard time coming up, Danielle, with examples on when it may be useful.
Mm,
Um, I
oh,
think I think I think maybe if you want to test prompts,
mhm.
for example, maybe in a context of testing prompts where you don't want the tool, where you want to test a prompt, where you want to test a prompt, and but you want to um, um, make abstraction of what the tool already knows about you. So you
Right.
want to see the answer that anyone else would receive. I can
Mm,
imagine that maybe in that context, starting with a blank slate um, could be um, could be useful. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. Okay, that's a difficult question, Danielle.
I'm
I
sorry. Or
yes,
you're welcome.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, all right. Okay, good. See, this is what happens if nobody else asks questions and Danielle starts asking questions. So please, everybody, make sure you make sure you ask your own questions. Otherwise, Danielle is going to ask this technical questions. Yes, yeah, but it's a good one. Yes. Um. Okay. On this slide, actually, I already preempted what's on this slide, so I don't need to dwell on this. We have a little bit of a scenario here, right? A little fun scenario. You are today, everybody is Sophie Dupont, okay? And Sophie Dupont, and if for gender reasons you rather be John Dupont, you can be John Dupont, okay? Right? But you are a PhD researcher. You're working for a food company that is developing Brazine-based sweeteners. So Brazine is a protein, a very high sweet protein that comes from a fruit that grows in West Africa called ubli. It's very sweet, much more sweeter than regular sugar. You have and it has zero calories. That's my kind of food. Very sweet and 0 calories. My kind of food. You have received a request from Augustus Banbridge Sutton, who is a journalist at Food Navigator, to give an interview on the company news surrounding a breakthrough in the scalable production of Brazine. So you work for a company, right? You're a PhD researcher. You work for a company that is developing Brazine. The company has sent out a press release on a breakthrough in the scalable production of Brazine. Augustus received that press release and has questions for you. Okay. The person in your PR team who is supposed to help you is sick, and you are left to your own devices. Luckily, you have ChatGPT to help you prepare for the media interview. In what follows, examples of prompts and answers to prompts will be shown using ChatGPT Pro. So I'm working with Pro. Pro is not that different from the regular version, but it is a little bit more efficient, and the quality of the answers are a little bit higher, right? So ChatGPT Pro cost me about to switch this on, and I also switched this on because in the middle of because one, I want to show you what the high quality answers look like, and two, I don't want to be in a situation during a live workshop where I run out of credits, of course. That would be a little bit embarrassing. So those are two reasons I use ChatGPT Pro. It is really not expensive. I think I paid $20 for this. So if you're gonna be using ChatGPT professionally, um, ChatGPT Pro, maybe switch it on and off for a month, and that could be useful. So at any rate, just lest there be any misunderstandings, what you're going to be seeing going forward are answers from ChatGPT live, um, ChatGPT in the ChatGPT Pro version. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to be switching, and Danielle, you need to tell me if I um, if there's parts that people cannot see, but I think will be just fine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with my first prompt, and we are at the half hour, which is fine. We are we're well on schedule. Okay. The name of the company is, by the way, Green Lab Partners. So I am a so okay. So I'm going to put in the first prompt live so everybody can see. Okay. I also have a document with prompts and answers to the prompts, so I can share that with the slide deck, and everybody can then
Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah.
read up, right? So I'm going to be putting in ChatGPT the following. I'm a PhD researcher at a food company called We Lab Partners, preparing for an interview on Brazil. Remember what I just said? Context. That's me giving context. My interviewer is Augustus Bambridge Sutton, food navigator. He wants to discuss a recent announcement from my company on the topic of Brazil. Has this journalist covered Brazil in the recent past? What did he write about Brazil? Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay. So let me walk you briefly through the answer. Yes, your interviewer has previously covered the sweet protein topic, including Brazil. Here are a few key takeaways. In the article Sweet Proteins, etc., he discussed sweet proteins broadly, mentioned Brazil specifically. He described them as naturally occurring in small quantities. His piece stated that Brazil did this. He discussed this. He also flags production challenges. He notes some application issues. So we're getting a very nice overview here on how this journalist has covered the topic, right? There's a link, right? ChatGPT will add links. So you can just click on that link and go out of ChatGPT to the primary source, okay? Why this is relevant for your interview? Um, you don't actually need to read you because when at the moment you're typing this into ChatGPT, you already know why it's relevant. And I don't think you will need to have ChatGPT explain to you why it's relevant. However, if you want, um, you can read all of this. Suggested prep points: since he has this prior viewpoint, you may want to prepare to discuss the following: the regulatory status, the scale of production pathway. This is all based on what he wrote in the past. So this is it's a lengthy answer I got. I'm not going to read it entirely in its entirety. You do not need me to do this. But needless to say, this is very interesting input. Okay. Okay. So that is the first prompt. Let's go to the second prompt. Okay. So this is me continuing the conversation now, right? Given his coverage on Brazil in tier one food trade media, such as his own publication, Food Business News and Food Dive. Notice how I'm explaining to ChatGPT what trade one tier media are, right? Because otherwise, I would not, and this is you needing to do a little bit of research or having somebody help you do that research, but I would it is good to sometimes be explicit. This is also what we call constraints, right? Be specific. So here I'm not just mentioning tier food trade media and hoping that ChatGPT will agree with me on what food one trade media are. I'm actually calling the the tier one trade media, the high quality trade media out, right? So giving his coverage and given the coverage on Brazil and tier one food trade media, such as his own publication, Food Navigator, Food Business News, and Food Dive. Okay. What are typical questions I can expect in an interview? First, give me a list of typical questions. And second, give me a list of tough questions. Okay. All right. There we go. Typical questions on product and science basics. Production, how to scale up production. Regulatory status. Sensory and formulation performance. How does it behave in beverages versus dairy versus bakery? Market and commercial context. What consumer need does Brazil solve? And then also your announcement specific to the announcement that you have prepared. Tough questions. Uh, Journalists often hear claims of excellent taste. Can you provide hard sensory data comparing Brazil to sucrose and stevia across applications? I think that's a good tough question, right? Um, you say Brazil is cost effective compared to what? Do you have cost in use benchmarks, etc., 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 right? If Brazil is so promising, why hasn't any company cracked mainstream commercialization yet? That's not a bad question, right? So now what follows here is this is typical ChatGPT. ChatGPT then adds the opportunity to then provide you with more information, right? So ChatGPT then typically adds, if you want, I can draft strong, concise answers for each typical and tough question. I can create a media briefing cheat sheet. I can craft 3 or 5 key messages. I'm not going to say yes to that because that would upset my entire flow of what follows. But ChatGPT will typically give you an answer and tell you, then add to that, oh, can I give you a report? Can I put it in a table? Can I do this? Can I do that? ChatGPT is here to serve you, right? So, so, so this can be a starting point. My recommendation is not to then just print this out and consider that to be your list of questions, right? That's not where I'm going at. But this could be a starting point, and this could also complement some of the questions you've probably already came up with yourself, right? Um, you can then ask questions about this. This is also the point I made about iterative um, engagement of ChatGPT. If there's any part here where you say, okay, um, yeah, I want to know more about what that question could look like, you just ask, and ChatGPT will take a deeper dive, right? Um, for example, I could put in right now in real time um, what other difficult questions could ChatGPT ask? Oh, good. Sorry, moment of distraction. Could the journalist ask about scaling up production? There you go. Below is a set of additional high-level and highly technical questions on the matter. Fermentation efficiency, strain performance. I'm deliberately not elaborating on this because there's a few things in there that I will not understand, right? Downstream processing costs, thermostability and processing losses, pilot versus commercial phase, cost competitiveness. Look at that, right? And it goes on and on quality, batch consistency, protein folding. And then I can ask another question on one of those then I can ask a question on number 8, another detailed question, and I can dig and dig and dig as much as I need to, as you know, within the realm, within the limits of what is relevant, of course. Okay, so I think these were already very useful answers, right? I'm starting to understand what the journalist has written in the past. I'm starting to understand what what kind of questions I could receive and what kind of tough questions I could receive. So that's all very useful. Now I'm going to add something else to the mix. I'm gonna link to the press release that was distributed, because remember, the scenario says that a press release went out. The news went out on a partnership. Okay, so given media coverage on Brazil in trade publications such as Food Navigator, Food Dive, and Food Business News, what are typical questions I can expect to receive on this release? And I'm sharing the URL on this release. Give me a list with questions I can expect to receive, and also a list of tough questions to expect. Limit your answers to the source I shared. Okay. Um, yes, and that last point, limit your answers to the source I shared, is also meant. That's also a constraint, of course, right? So remember what I said about being specific and clear and putting in constraints. So I'm here clearly telling ChatGPT, don't go look everywhere for possible questions, but really put yourself in the place of a journalist. I could have actually asked ChatGPT this verbatim. I could have used those words. Put yourself in the place of a journalist. I could have done that, right? Um, that's falls under role, right? So put yourself, but by asking, by telling ChatGPT, just stick to the source, stick to this one article. I'm being very specific, right? There we go. And there you go. And you can see here all these links. So ChatGPT is sticking to the one source I shared, right? It is not using any other sources to come up with possible questions, right? Again, what I would then do is I would read the release and compare what I see here to the release. So again, don't just run with this, but check the work done by ChatGPT. Quality control, of course, right? ChatGPT will sometimes make mistakes, right? Nonetheless, nonetheless, I think everybody in the call, I hope, will agree with me that this can save valuable time, right? This can be very useful. So based on the press release, a few typical questions that ChatGPT has identified. How do you manage regulatory risk? You mentioned economically competitive levels of expression. What does that mean in practice? So ChatGPT has read the note, and ChatGPT is now coming up with questions on the press release. And there's also a section with tough questions, right? Because I had asked more than one question, right? I had asked general questions, and I had asked tough questions. Well, here, this is a good tough question. What's your contingency if regulatory approval is delayed? Does the business model still hold? That's a good tough question, right? No less than 12. If you'd like, I can draft suggested answers. I'm not doing that for the moment. Um, but this was very useful. Okay, prompt 4. Now I'm going to ask ChatGPT for the following. What are typical misunderstandings journalists will have about Brazil based on what you can find on the website of Greenlight Partners on the one hand, which is the primary source, and based on media coverage of Brazil in trade media outlets such as Food Navigator, Food Business News, and Food Dive. So what I'm doing is I'm showing two sources. I'm showing Greenlight Partner source, which is the company. This is my primary source, and I'm asking ChatGPT, take a look at that primary source and also take a look at media coverage. What do you see as typical misunderstandings? Why is this a useful question? Because when you prepare for a media interview, it's good to anticipate what the journalist may not fully really understand, because that has an impact on how you're going to prepare your messages, of course, and what questions to expect. So knowing what misunderstandings exist in any sector, because forget about food now. Food is just an example. Everything I'm talking about applies to every possible sector and every possible industry and every possible application you'll be working on. There's always going to be a certain part that people get wrong. There's always going to be certain misunderstandings. There's always going to be certain things that need to be rectified and explained again and again and again. And it's good to know about these things, right? Here we go. Some media, okay. So some media, I'm just giving a few examples. I'm shopping a little bit around. I'm just giving a few examples and reading a few answers, right? Some media may infer from commercial scale production language that Brazil is already in wide food beverage use, but GreenLab's wording suggests scale up is in progress, not mass commercial rollout yet. Okay, so clarify what commercial scale means for you. GreenLab emphasizes dual routes, so both corn and fermentation, but media may simplify and assume one route, likely fermentation is the primary path. GreenLab frames it as a proprietary technology to grow protein inside corn kernels. Media may miss the nuance and think it is simply corn farming. Some trade media coverage emphasizes very high sweetness factors and implies broad equivalency, but production cost, etc., stability may differ. You should clarify the realistic use cases and current limitations. So it seems like ChatGPT has here made a mix of things. It has found certain misunderstandings in media coverage and has also guesstimated that certain misunderstandings may exist. Let me ask ChatGPT whether that's true what I just said. If I understand well, your misunderstandings are based on a mix of findings from media articles and what you estimate the media to get wrong, most likely. Exactly. You've understood it correctly, ChatGPT says. Okay, so illustrates the point that the work flow can always be iterative, right? Go into a conversation with ChatGPT. And if there's any doubt on the kind of answer you get, if you don't really know where ChatGPT got the information from, if you don't really know how ChatGPT came to a deduction, came to a conclusion, came to a recommendation, the best source to give you that answer is ChatGPT itself. Okay? All right. There's another prompt. Consider for the sake of this exercise. Oh, before I move on, Danielle, are there any other questions?
I don't see questions in the chats. So to everybody, you can still ask your questions. Maybe a question from me again, and sorry if it's difficult.
Yeah,
But
you
uh,
can use another one of your credits. Yes. Yes.
So I was wondering, let's see, yeah.
Go ahead.
If you're in an interview setting and the journalist goes into a direction that you're not expecting,
Yeah.
and it's maybe not even one of those difficult questions, but it's just a question that's kind of out of context.
Yeah.
Can ChatGPT also help you to kind of redirect to the content of your interview or to your core message, maybe through that press release? And how would you approach that?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, so I appreciate you asking that question. Um, that's actually they're not ChatGPT that's going to help you, but what's going to help you then is a media delivery technique.
Mhm.
So this workshop, what we're doing here is not meant to be a media training proper, where I'm going to prepare, where I'm going to, I'm showing you how to use ChatGPT in preparatory media research, but
Mhm.
that is only the preparation part of a media interview. There's also the media delivery, and that is something where you are going to have to ask somebody, you being the spokesperson, are going to have to ask somebody to train you, right?
Mhm.
To train you or to give you at least a good example. And there are then techniques, Danielle, such as bridging,
Yeah.
that it's called the ABC technique. You acknowledge a question, you bridge, use a bridging statement to a key message. And that is a technique that can then be applied when there's a question that may derail the conversation or that puts you in a situation where you want to bridge to one of your key messages.
Yeah.
Um, so the answer is yes, that is something um, that can be managed, but but there's gonna be you're gonna have then it would be recommended then to use a delivery technique that's not in the scope. Of course,
Right.
needless to say, what is in the scope of what we're doing here is ideating, for example, key messages. And if you're going to be bridging, you're going to be bridging to a key message. So, so the preparatory work here can then help make that move, but the delivery itself, you're not going to tell the journalist, let me open my laptop for a moment and get into ChatGPT and give you an answer in a moment. So
No,
ChatGPT, you're going to have to say ChatGPT goodbye prior to entering in the conversation. Yes.
of course, yeah.
Yeah. Another good question, Danielle. Yes. Yes. Okay. Consider, for the sake of this exercise, this press release, and I'm sharing a link, um, as raw material for a press briefing. Create a table that provides me solely based on the document, mind the constraint, a table solely based on the document, the key messages that are useful for a media interview. A maximum of three. There's another constraint, a maximum of three, right? You should never have 8 key messages. That does not work. People cannot process 8 key messages. So give me a table solely based on the document with key messages that are useful for the media interview and proof points for each key message. And this is then almost the last prompt. Huh? So we are still within time. There we go. There we have our key messages and there we have our proof points. Okay. It's not perfect, huh? How ChatGPT structured this? It's helpful. It's a crutch. It's helpful. It'll help you do this yourself, but it's not perfect. Okay. Um, then one other prompt I have is I'm looking to prepare for a question on market size, right? Because I think that in the context of an interview on this application, a question will be asked on market size. I think that's reasonable to expect. Give me a view on the market for Brazil in the US and the expected market for the next 5 years. Report the information in bullets and mention your sources. By the way, in an interview, when you're preparing for an interview, almost always will you know in advance at least a few questions. A journalist will typically, and you can ask and should ask a question for a few answers in advance, but the journalist will not give you all questions in advance, right? So you need to do a little bit of, you're going to have to put some work in yourself and try to complete the list with questions a journalist has. A journalist will, for example, say, this is what the conversation is going to be about. This is the topic, and I'm going to ask you questions about, for example, A, B, and C, and that's it. And the rest is for you to fill in. Okay. Okay. So let me put in the next prompt. So and maybe this is then something I need to add for a next iteration of my deck. But a prompt could have been, I have received the following 3 questions from a journalist in preparation of an interview. The journalist writes for this publication. What are possible other answers the journalist would then ask me in the context of the interview? For example. Okay. And there we go. I already know what's going to show up, and you will have it you will receive that in a document from me because I've pasted all the answers in a document. And here's the market data where you can shop um, and find useful information. And it's going through a lot of sources to find that market data. It's thinking. I'm letting it think. There's a button here that says answer now, but I'm not pushing that button. I have time. There's time to have the tool think. This is also the advantage of working with the pro version, that the thinking is that this is a lengthier and deeper thinking process than you would have in the other free version. So I'm letting ChatGPT crunch the numbers and prepare an answer. And here we go. Here we have, from different sources, market projections. Okay. You don't want me to go over all of this. I think I think you've got my point, right? Okay. And then there's one final prompt I want to share with you. Today, I will be giving my interview in Brazil. That's a prompt for on the day of the interview, right? Today, I will be giving my interview in Brazil. Has there been any news today on sweeteners or in Brazil that I should know of? Limit yourself, again, constraints. I'm being precise, specific, using constraints. Limit yourself to US media sources and report back to me in bullets with mention of sources. There we go. And that's the last run. Often forgotten by PR teams and by spokespeople, but this is also an important part of preparing for an interview. And I have links to a few recent news items. I'm not sure any of this was today, so I'm gonna have to check, click on the links. This one, for example, it's taking a little bit. Yes, November 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, we're already November 19th. Okay. At any rate, I got a list here with a few recent reports. Food Navigator is a tier 1 trade media outlet, so I would then take a look at this one also. And I already see here that this is August, so that's not too recent either. But here I have an answer that I can then consult, and where I can ask additional questions if useful, right? That's it. That's it. Those are the prompts I wanted to share with you, and that's it. If this brings me to the slide number 6, the Q&A slide. If anybody has any questions left, please let me know, and I hope that you found whatever came before of use.
Yes, thank you very much. So yeah, the floor is to the participants that are listening along. Yeah, please drop your questions, comments, whatever in the chat. And I see one comment here that is about memory. So there's also a function in ChatGPT where you can personalize ChatGPT and configure in your account um, the tab personalization where you can tell things about your profession, tell more about yourself, and configure the behavior of ChatGPT. Is that also something you use?
It's not something I use personally,
Mhm.
but I think it is something that could be very useful. Yes,
Mhm. Okay.
yes. Because ChatGPT in the conversations I personally have with ChatGPT remembers who I am and remembers the context in which I function. I don't see a need for that, but there may be a functionality in there that I need to discover myself that adds another layer of customization.
Yeah.
That is very well possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Super interesting. Yeah. Um, I will give the listeners, the followers, some time to put a question in the chat.
Of course. Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was a lot for 7 a.m., but maybe it was also a lot for 2 p.m. in Brussels, right? Yes.
it's possible. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
possible. People are a bit tired.
Yes.
Well, I at least found it a very interesting session, very hands-on, and I think it can definitely be useful for everybody that's interacting with journalists. So, yes, I thank you very much for the useful content of today.
Yes.
Yeah,
You're very welcome. Um, um, I'm I'm happy to see that it was to I'm taking a look at the chat, so I'm happy to see that it was useful
yeah,
to people. And as promised, I'm going to be making the deck available and the
yeah,
document with the prompts and answers.
yeah,
And Danielle, then feel free to also share my email address. If
of course.
after this workshop somebody would have an idea of a question that pops into mind and they want to ask me something, send
Yeah.
me an email and I will be glad to give you a personal answer.
Oh, that's great.
Okay?
Yes, I just see positive comments here in the chats. Very useful. Thank you for the tips. Very concrete, very useful. So that's nice to hear.
Perfect. Yes. That's
That's
why we
great.
do it, right? That's why we do it.
That's why we do it indeed.
Yes. Thank you very
Well,
much. Thank you,
yeah.
everybody. I know everybody has other meetings and other things to need to run to. So thank you for your time. And
Yes.
for everybody, thank you for asking questions. And Danielle, I appreciate you inviting me over.
Yeah, thank you very
Okay.
much for sharing your expertise with us today. So yeah, we will share the link to the recording of this session to you in the coming days, and I will also share indeed the prompts, the slides. I already received them from you yesterday, Yo.
You did. Yes.
Uh, Jo's email address. You
Yes.
also receive that. And then, yeah, I will just wanted to tell you that our next lunch talk is scheduled for December 10, and that will be a Simingo workshop on how to stand out as an expert in the media. And I think a lot of the lessons we learned here can also be super useful for that. So
Absolutely.
they click
Yes.
very well together.
There you go.
So I will include the link to this following lunch talk also in the email you receive from me. So enjoy the rest of your day and see you at the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye bye.